Right. It appears. Right. There we go. Right. We are live in the Facebook group because I can see it on my other screen. So we are here. So yeah, kia ora everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Be Better podcast. And this week we have got Jenson and Amber not from MRCagney, as I've been calling them, from MRCagney. So yeah, these guys, we worked with them a wee while ago on their B Corp. They've recently certified as a B Corp, a pretty high scoring B Corp. I'd say you did it. It was a solid B plus, I reckon, in terms of B Corp scores. A little room for improvement. Yes, we're coming together to chat today and just get to know these cool cats a little bit more, understand what they've been up to. So yeah, Jenson, Amber, over to you. Maybe take it in turns. Perhaps ladies first. Who are you? What does MRCagney do? And why are we here talking about cool B Corp stuff?
I might hand that one over to Jenson. Just set us up to set the scene for who we are, and then I will happily introduce myself.
Go for it.
All right. Well, kia ora. So I'm Jenson Varghese, the managing director here at MRCagney, or MRC for short. And so maybe I'll start with the company. So we are a sustainable transport consultancy. And so our focus is public transport, walking and cycling. We provide strategy and advice to primarily city councils and central government clients around how they can make their cities better. And our mission is really to create a world where people can thrive without a car. So that's not to say that, we're anti-car, but we do also recognize that all our cities, especially in the last sort of 50 years or so, have been built around the private vehicle. And what that means is if you can't drive, if you can't afford a car, if you live in certain places, or you have, disabilities or sort of restrictions, then life can be pretty bad for some people. And we're trying to create cities where anyone can thrive, whether or not they have a car. Kids can sort of walk safely on streets. That's play in streets. That's kind of the city we're trying to create, and that's our company mission. And so, as I said, I'm the managing director. So my role is really just overseeing the overall business. I've worked in in the transport and urban planning sector for about 15 odd years. Been with MRC for about 13 of those. And so, oh God, no, I've been working for like 20 years now. I'm getting old. But yeah, but 13 of those years have been with MRC. So, and yeah, look, it's a pretty special place. It's pretty incredible group of people that are pretty committed to this goal of making a difference. And so, yeah, that's MRC. That's me. I'll hand it back to Amber.
Like catch the hot potato. So my name's Amber Fletcher. I'm the operations manager at MRCagney. I've been here for about 4.5 years, I think. I started as a consultant and then moved into this role about 1.5 years ago. And my job is really to support Jenson with the running of the business, but I'm much more internally focused and making sure that, we're not only doing good in the community, as Jenson said, but we're really sort of living those values as a company and making sure that we're looking after our people and that all our processes are supporting our work so that we can be the most effective in making that change in the community, but also that we're supporting our staff and being giving good internal customer service, if you will, as well, and making sure that our staff are well supported to do the work they do.
So you mean you do all the work, Jenson takes all the glory?
I couldn't possibly say that. Those are your words, Tim.
That's kind of what I'm hearing. That's just how I'm hearing. I think Jenson's just the glory boy poster child for the company. Yeah, we do really cool stuff. What have we done? Amber, what have we done? Tell me what we've done. I know how this works. Yeah, there's plenty of companies that we hang out with where I know how it works. So I guess how do you both get into transport consulting? I don't really remember anyone at school going, when I grow up, I want to be a transport consultant, because I think that sounds really cool. Like how did you get into that as a career path? Was it something that you both kind of wanted to do from an early age, or is it kind of one of those careers that you sort of fall into it at a certain, or is it like MI5 or the FBI? You get shoulder tapped in a dark room. Can you solve this problem? And you go, yeah, I can actually. They go, great, you're going to be a transport consultant now.
Okay. Do you want me to go first for that one, Jenson?
Go for it.
Your turn.
Okay. So I started I guess, yeah, my journey in transport began. I did my master's in public policy when I was living in Washington, DC, and I sort of focused on urban policy. And then when I was graduating, I did an emerging leaders program with the local government in Washington, DC, and got sort of placed in an agency, which happened to be transport. And so I was in the policy and planning department. And the idea was that, you'd sort of get some work experience and then maybe move around to some of the other agencies. I was actually working in the commercial vehicle planning department there, which was quite interesting. And we dealt with a lot of commercial buses and things as well. And I enjoyed it. I had a great boss and he convinced me to stay, is basically, and the rest is history. That's basically it. It was really great though. Like, it was, a lot of great opportunities. I got to work on fun stuff like planning all the bus transport coming in from around the States for Obama's second inauguration. Like, that was quite a cool thing to work on, right? And
Nice.
then we moved back to New Zealand, and I then ended up at MRC when I came back to work here. So that's sort of how I ended up.
Nice. So yes, if you can organize the buses for a massive event in Washington, DC, that's probably nothing bigger than a presidential inauguration, then you can possibly sort out a few buses in Auckland CBD. Maybe. So why Washington? Like, was it the program that kind of took you there, or
we'd moved there for my husband's job, so he was working for the federal government, and
can't say any more than that, just
exactly. Back to that MI5.
So actually you're an MI5, so hang on, Jenson does no work, Amber's an MI5 sleeper agent working in transport, so if the buses are all bugged, we know who did it. It was Amber. It's a long play. You heard it here first, people. Wow.
And somebody's going to pick this up.
Right? Oh my goodness.
Yeah, we're probably on a watch list now, aren't we? Well, we're already on the watch list because Amber's put Jensen and I on the watch list probably 6 months ago. She's like, yeah, these guys clearly need to be. and so how about you, Jensen? How did you get into this?
Yeah, so in Aotearoa, there isn't really a transport planning qualification as such. And so it's not the sort of thing that you can study. And so I did a degree called engineering science, which is like applied mathematics and computing. And then basically try to, and at the time, so this is going back to like 15 years or so, there wasn't a lot of, transport planning was sort of largely dominated by civil engineers, maybe some planners as well. And so they didn't really have a diverse range of qualifications. So I kind of just managed to convince them that, I knew what transport modeling was. I had no idea what that was, but I did a lot of math modeling at uni. And so I was like, I can kind of figure this stuff out. And so started doing like transport models, which are quite sort of detailed, like simulations of, motorways, roads, and this, like, if you expand this motorway, this is what it's going to do for traffic. And, I was working on like a motorway interchange, which was somewhat soul destroying and quite sort of esoteric. And then, but through that process, I realized that actually transport's a really powerful way to make a difference. It affects so many people's lives. There's so much good that can come of transport, and we're also seeing a lot of negative effects of it. So I caught the transport bug then, but I wanted to work in a much more strategic space rather than kind of the details. So like you said, get somebody else to do all the work and just kind of think about the high level thing.
I knew it.
And so it was actually a classmate of mine who had been working at MRC and this amazing small consultancy that does strategic work and is focusing on doing good. It was and I just kind of took the plunge and kind of went into the strategic transport space, and haven't looked back.
Nice. Hotel California, you can't leave. I have visions of you two like playing like with Lego as kids, like building towns and cities, and like were you into it from like an early age like that, or had you always been like a spatial planner? Because I would imagine like your mindset to visualize a city and an infrastructure and how things like go together, like you've got to have a certain way of approaching the world, which I don't have. Like if I was in charge of infrastructure planning it would be fun, but we wouldn't be getting to work on time. There'd probably be more slides and sort of fun things than actual useful infrastructure.
Yeah, look, I mean, so full disclosure, I'm probably not the best at like the spatial planning side of things. But I think for me there's always like, so I grew up in Samoa, and especially my father's always big on like environmental sustainability and just seeing how things were done historically, that like traditional ways being so much more kind of sustainable and better for the environment, and how that was like environment was degrading, like that was that's always been big for me. So it was probably less for me it's less about transport, it's more about the environmental and the social impacts that we can make. That's always been big for me. Quite a few people in the office, the older folk in the office, a lot of them growing up playing SimCity. So I think there is like Lego to some degree. SimCity is a common theme with quite a few transport planners as well.
Nice.
I don't know. What about you, Amber?
Yeah, I'm not sure as a Lego person. I think I've always been really interested in how things work, right? Like if I go to the theatre, I'm actually quite interested in what's going on backstage, right? Like I see the pretty picture, I see what, everyone's putting forward, but who's actually making this happen? There is a reason that I'm the operations manager, right? This is a theme. But like, in almost everything, I'm always like, but how does it work, right? And, I guess transport is such a critical part of that for cities. Like I love cities, but I really want to understand how they work. How do people get to where they need to be? And, are there barriers to that? And as Jenson said, like it's quite a big sort of focus on sort of environmental outcomes and sustainability and things. But I think probably for me more, it's that social aspect and understanding how things work and how people get to what they need to get to be able to live fulfilling lives, right? So
nice.
Yeah,
so you got a good balance there, so the yin and yang of the social and the environmental, and coming together nicely. I think the one thing you need to think about is if there are people, the older folk still playing SimCity, you should be monitoring for the ones that unleash Godzilla, because they're the ones that you might just need to put on your watch list and make sure. Dave, that's interesting. I've noticed you've unleashed Godzilla 3 times this week on your simulation. Are you okay?
It's good. It's a good metric.
Yeah, and was it the UFO that would fly through as well and like zap the city? Yeah, it's vaguely coming back to me. Yeah, I know, nice. So, what sort of projects does MRCagney do? Like, and where do you do them? Are you across the whole of New Zealand? Are you international, or are you just Tamaki Makaurau, Auckland? Yeah. Would we have been? What is a project that someone might have been on or been a part of unwittingly, and now being monitored on the surveillance that Amber's put in?
Yeah. So I guess maybe starting geographically, we used to be part of an Australian company, and then last year we executed a management buyout to be 100% sort of Kiwi owned, and it was just we were quite keen to sort of be in charge of our own destiny. So that happened about a year ago. So we're just we're 100% Kiwi owned company. In terms of the work we do at the moment, it's primarily in Aotearoa, and of that, I guess it's a mixture of we do work across the country. And that's for like sort of city councils, local governments, as well as central government. So projects that we've been involved with that you might have heard of, for anyone in Tamaki Makaurau, the Northern Busway. So one of the most successful sort of public transport projects in the country or in the Southern Hemisphere. MRCagney was involved in that 20 years ago. That's how we started here. We've always kind of lived and breathed public transport. We've been we do the early planning and strategy of these things. So we're not a detailed design company. We're not an engineering company that builds it. We come up with the ideas and make the case for why these projects will be positive. So Northern Busway, redesigning sort of Auckland's public transport network. There's been sort of significant sort of changes to like national legislation around urban development, allowing for more intensification. So we've provided advice, evidence to inform elements of that overall national policy statement for urban development. Yeah, off the top of my head, public transport projects in terms of early planning across the country, we've probably been involved in quite a few of them in Auckland, Wellington, Christchurch, Dunedin, and sort of in between as well. Less maybe potentially more controversial or certainly politically challenging is parking reform. So that's a big part of what we do, and it's, you know, everyone wants to get a car. If they're driving, they want a car park right outside where they want to go. But if everyone gets that, then it's going to be a city of car parks with no buildings. And it's recognizing that there's a massive sort of subsidy and inequity thing that comes with providing a whole lot of parking for free. And so we've helped councils and our clients just manage their parking better, which actually makes development and construction more affordable, and just, yeah, contributing to that Better Places objective. So that's
how are you sort of finding the shift, or is there a shift happening? Because I know, you know, I guess post quakes here in Christchurch, there was a fair amount, it felt like, of community interest and buy-in for light rail to connect Rolleston and Pegasus. So if you're not from Christchurch, if you're listening from overseas, or you're not even from, if you're in Auckland, you might not know parts of Christchurch. There's two sort of big commuter belt towns that feed into the Christchurch as the main hub, and the traffic getting into the city from both those places was just awful, because everyone's trying to leave at the same time with one person typically in the car. And there was there seems to be some pretty good groundswell support for, look, why don't you just build a light rail into a central train station, because most people are working in the CBD, and then from there you could make use of e-bikes or scooters or what have you to get you to your that sort of final mile of delivery. But it just came down to, now we'll just build a bigger motorway. Are you seeing, I mean, clearly I presume you're trying to play a part in sort of shifting attitudes and mindsets at a government and other infrastructure departmental level. Is that becoming more so, or is it still kind of like motorway? It feels like motorway is the big hammer that most departments can kind of, you know, it's easy, it's an easy crowd pleaser to say, yeah, we're just going to build a bigger or another motorway because people like cars and we look good opening another motorway. Yeah, what's your take on that?
Amber's keeping quiet. I think she's going to throw this.
It's all yours, Amber.
Well, I think, I mean, I'll let Jenson sort of answer that question around sort of where things are changing, but I think that increasingly we need to understand how we can work within our existing infrastructure, right? And rather than either building a big light rail or a big motorway project, understanding how we can, you know, shift the times that we travel, or shift the mode that we're traveling, or shift the sort of the capacity of the vehicle that we might be traveling in, that sort of thing, to think about how we can work within our means. And there's definitely been a bit of a shift sort of with the legislation that's come out and some of the policies and plans, that we're going to need to start thinking more about that if we're going to meet our emissions reductions goals and we're going to meet our climate change commitments. The question is how quickly we can do that, I guess, and how responsive we can be. But that is definitely sort of an area that we work in as well, maybe providing some of that sort of background advice and some examples of how this can be done, either whether it's individual projects that might feed into a bigger impact, if they can be scaled up or applied in a lot of different places, or whether there are sort of legislative pathways or policy pathways to support that sort of shift in New Zealand. So
is there like a hierarchy almost of solutions in terms of their, like, do you have like a go-to list of a hierarchy of solutions that are kind of like easy to implement, that provide typically good outcomes, or is it 100% nuanced on each project? Like, would it be like if everyone rode a bike, like that's the solution, or is it like, well, no, because not everyone can ride a bike, obviously, if you have a disability or you don't have a bike? Yeah, I'm guessing it's probably more nuanced than my idiot brain would be able to apply, which is why I'm not doing what you do.
I think the really challenging thing is that it is complex, and there's so many different factors at play. Like I kind of talked about, transport planning historically being dominated by sort of civil engineering, but it covers everything from land use to, it contributes to housing affordability, to environmental impacts, to to access to jobs, to to other social outcomes. And it is incredibly nuanced. And the challenge for decision makers, particularly like at a political level, is that new infrastructure that's shiny is really easy to sell, but actually, like some of the most transformational things we could do anywhere is just increasing existing bus services frequencies. So rather than waiting an hour, if you have to wait 15 minutes, you almost have to turn up and go, and you don't have to worry about your timetable and things like that. And so the real challenge that we have is that the powerful stuff that can really make a difference sometimes isn't politically sexy, right? And recognizing that in the environment that we're heading into increasingly, where we're going to be funding constrained, it's going to be around doing, as Amber mentioned, doing more with existing assets, because there isn't like this abundant supply of money. There isn't, and there are impacts of, like, there are negative impacts from every decision that we make. And so it's being really considered about how we do that. So yeah, it's tricky. It is really tricky. And there's so many different players and interests and stakeholders that navigating it and communicating so that everyone's making informed decisions is really, really hard.
Sorry, you go, Amber.
I was just going to say, but I think, some of the work that we're doing, you asked if there are kind of like a hierarchy of suggestions that we would make if people are choosing. And so if you look at sort of in the emissions reduction space, or maybe like reducing the amount of, as you said, a lot of those cars that were driving in just had one person in them, sorry. And while there are lots of, quite often a response to reduce the amount of like single occupancy vehicle travel, or which translates into emissions reductions and things, there is often more of a package of interventions that you need to think of to get to that. It's we often say there's no silver bullet, right? Like that's something that we say quite often, because as Jenson said, for folks are sort of in the political sphere, it's really nice to be able to point to one single thing that you've done and say, well, this is going to solve everything. The reality is there's very rarely such a project or a piece of infrastructure. But one of the things that we've certainly found with some of the work that we've done is that while those packages are really important to get to, whether it's reducing private vehicle travel or emissions reductions, but parking is often key to that. And that's sort of why Jenson talked about that. It's not always very popular, parking reform, but it's often really critical to unlocking the benefits of those other interventions that you're maybe implementing.
I guess it kind of feels like here, New Zealand, Australia, the US in particular, it's kind of like, the car is this birthright that I have to have a car. I get to drive it. I want to listen to my music. I want the aircon set at my level. Like, I don't really want someone else in my, like, the whole idea of car sharing, I guess, has got maybe increasingly more common as traffic's got so bad. And obviously in Auckland, you've got your car shared lanes on the, coming into the commute. I don't know, the UK seems, I guess, in London, you've got the tube, you've got other bigger infrastructure that's kind of more adept at moving people around. Is it how much of it is a play at a government level on big project infrastructure versus the corporate level, where increasingly companies are starting to think about? When we were talking with a company yesterday about their B Corp, and they're like, they were like, should we incentivize our staff to walk or public transport? So, well, yeah, if you do that, you're going to get some points on your assessment. So that's clearly seen as a positive. But then also, we need to have a mindset shift on the individual level of, well, actually, I don't need to have a car, or I don't. So yeah, how do you play amongst all of that? I guess you're mainly focused on the project side of it, but yeah, what's your sense around how do we move the needle more quickly to get change? Is it government, business, or one-on-one individuals, or a mixture?
I actually think it's at the government level, and like, so we quite often hear the statement that, oh, actually, Kiwis love their cars, right? But I guess the kind of response to that is it's more like it's an arranged marriage or a forced marriage where you don't have a choice, you don't have any other choice. And if I talk about the Northern Busway project, and I mean that was an infrastructure solution, but there are like I talked about increasing frequencies as a way of doing that without building new infrastructure. But in that case, so that's the planning went on for started 30 years ago, and before, when it was built, there was this pretty famous Herald cartoon that says the big white elephant. Like everyone was saying this was a joke, a waste of money. And so for those who aren't in Auckland or who don't know of it, the Northern Busway is basically a busway in the North Shore part of Auckland, and then it goes over the harbour bridge and comes into the city. And there's no sort of infrastructure on the harbour bridge, but it's there's a lot of separated infrastructure on the North Shore part of Auckland. And so when this was built, they said it was a white elephant. So 20 years later, there's more people coming over the harbour bridge in buses than there are in cars during the peak period. Wow. And so this isn't like businesses sort of subsidizing public transport. There's an element of communicating with the public, but it's actually, this is so much more convenient. I don't have to drive. I don't get stuck in traffic, and I can, be on my phone or read or just look at the awesome view and enjoy that rather than being stuck in kind of stressful driving environment. So I think it's really around providing people with the choices, giving them a genuine option rather than making people do it because it's the sustainable thing to do. That's so secondary, or maybe even kind of less down the list than just giving people a genuine option.
I would agree with that. And I think it's really important for governments to provide those options. But I think that there's a role for businesses as well to nudge their employees, maybe. And, there's all sorts of things like, workplace travel plans and things like that that businesses can put in place. But there's also the financial incentives that businesses provide for their employees. If they're providing car parks for their employees, why wouldn't you drive, right? And I think that that's something that's really important. Again, it flows down from the government because there are policy settings that you can put in place, whether those are tax incentives. There's been a proposal recently to provide the fringe benefit tax exemption for public transport subsidies. Is that right, Jenson? I'm getting that right? Yeah. Which would at least put that on a level playing field with providing car parks for staff.
So it's just for context in that. So employers can provide a car park tax-free, but if you give an employee a public transport pass, there's actually tax disbenefits for an employer to do that. So this is what we talked about, the kind of uneven playing field or subsidies that have historically been in place for driving or for the private vehicle.
Yep. And I think because in the UK, they there was, certainly it was happening a few years ago, you got some tax benefits if you subsidize your staff to buy a bike or get into a non-car based sort of form of transport. So I guess it's the same with everything. It's with any change, you need that government infrastructure regulation to set a framework or some boundaries, business to be able to take some action somehow, which then creates an incentive to the individual. And I think it's the same with the broader, B Corp sustainability. Everyone's kind of playing a role. Interesting. I had a thought then, but it's escaped my mind. No, it'll come back to me. No, it's gone. Oh no, yeah. So that was it. I was going to say. So obviously most people listening to this podcast would be a business. So what would be like a top tip or a couple of ideas if you're a business that wants to sort of think about how you're moving your people around? What are some things to have a look at? Are there any top tips?
So I think. So I'll start and you can continue, Jenson. I think, in terms of a lot of companies do have workplace travel plans and things like that. There's a lot of support that's around for developing those, but things like providing end of trip facilities for people that want to cycle into work, thinking about providing, or at least giving people the choice to choose whether they might want a public transport pass versus, just the default being we'll provide you with a car park. For much bigger companies, there's lots of ways that you can sort of incentivize, think about how you're providing your parking, or maybe pricing your parking to consider how people can get to work. Yeah, I think there's a range of options available there, but as Jenson said, a lot of it is about making sure, even thinking, about providing opportunity, which is a lot more available now for teleworking, and where people work and all of that sort of thing. All of that is going to contribute to thinking about how your folks move around.
And I guess the only other thing that I would mention is, and it's tricky because I guess there's leases and things in place, but when considering where you locate, and that doesn't come up all the time, but just assuming that somewhere that's got lots of parking is the ideal outcome. Like we've worked with businesses that have moved from those sort of locations to central city locations, and it was a big deal at the time. Staff members who'd been driving for 20 years of their career would now have to catch public transport, and that change was a challenge and initially disruptive, but people found, it's awesome being in the city, awesome being on the bus or catching the ferry into work, because then it's quite relaxing. I didn't realize how stressful driving was. Actually, there's all these cafes around here that it's a different environment. I'm meeting more people in the city. It's actually business is doing better because I'm running into more people because there's lots of people in the city. There's a location element that I guess it's hard if you're in a long-term lease, but not assuming that just because you've always done something one way, that's the way you need to keep doing things in the future.
That's kind of life though, isn't it? It's like we just get into a habit, and it's like, well, we've kind of always done it that way, and we don't stop. But I think the COVID, working from home, I guess it's a double-edged sword though, because some people might be more nervous to get on public transport now because of fear of a pandemic, and I'm on a bus or a train or whatever with 20 people that might be carrying some virus. But yeah, I mean, I spend most of my time working out of my home office here, and when I do have to go into town, it's pretty rare. I do try and take the bus where I can. I've got my bike out. I was going to try and get to a meeting this morning on my bike, but I didn't. I failed miserably. I feel really, really guilty now of talking to two infrastructure gurus, and I drove to a meeting this morning. But it is a mindset shift, and I think also, you kind of, it's kind of like a networking event. I can't really turn up sweaty, and stinky on my bike, but it's like, well, actually, should I? And why can't I do that? Not that I'm saying you want to be absolutely drenched in sweat, shaking hands with people, but yeah, I think there's a lot of it is just our perception and that changed. But when I commuted into town, I drove in a couple of weeks ago for another networking event in the evening, and the traffic, it took me like almost 40 minutes to do what can be like a 10 or 12 minute drive. And I'm just like, I cannot understand how you, looking at everyone around, how do you all do this every day? Like, I'm going insane doing it once. When you're suggesting infrastructure, do you report and suggest and provide that data? Like, is there that depth of granularity on, look, you could kind of do a motorway setup here with lots of people driving. However, the mental health damage of 1,000 people an hour being stuck in a car, hating each other and trying to cut each other up, because you could take that to quite a large degree of like, well, the impact of someone having a stressful commute is bad for them at work, but then they get home, what's the impact of them on their relationship with their kids? Are they able to be a good community member? There's quite a large ripple effect just based, whereas, if I'd gone for my bike ride this morning, it was a beautiful 17 degrees, blue sky, I would have felt really energized, and I should have got on my bike. Would have been really nice. I would have got probably an hour's worth of exercise in, which I'm not going to get now because I've got a really busy day. So like all of that adds up. Like, can you capture that, and do you capture that?
There's quite a bit of evidence out there about it. And we try our best to ensure that feeds into the decision-making process, but it is tricky. So I guess it's the sort of thing that I think everyone's generally aware of, and there's a lot of evidence about the health benefits of sort of walking and cycling, even PT to some degree, because you walk to and from sort of stops. and the disbenefits that come from driving, and it's health. So there's a certain number, I forget the number off the top of my head, but like deaths that come from just automobile sound, just like noise pollution.
Wow.
And it's there's a lot of disbenefits. So there's awareness of it, but feeding that into a case and making convincing the political argument, making convincing political arguments about why to do things differently is tricky, because it's really making the case for change. So yeah, we try, but it's not.
Yeah,
it's challenging.
Yeah, I can't remember the guy's name, but there was a guy, we used to live just around the corner, and he used to work for the city council, and we would quite often get the same bus. And the first time we kind of got talking, and every time we were on the way in, we would have like these really deep philosophical conversations around like the meaning of life, and like you just kind of felt, because I think sometimes people get on the bus, headphones on, I'm just going to be on TikTok or whatever I'm doing. It's like almost as bad, as mentally bad for you, I guess, as being in a car by yourself. But yeah, it was that connection that we had with a neighbor who I ordinarily probably wouldn't have really got to say hi to, that there was a value to that. And I guess it's how do you capture that? And I think this is the challenge with the purpose and the impactful side of doing good is, so some economists will probably try and put a dollar value on that, but it's like can't really put a dollar value on having a really good chat with a neighbor and having an idea buzz around your head for the rest of the day that keeps you entertained. Yeah.
And I think that's really important too. It's not just about how you get to, places you need to go, whether it's your job or, your school or your university or whatever, but it's also just thinking about our communities. And so we often think about transport as a way to get somewhere, perhaps sort of longer distance, but it can also just be that sort of smaller scale, just walking around, right? And being able to walk to things, and how we design our cities. There's a really, the relationship between how we design our cities and land use and the transport system is really critical as well. And those sort of benefits that you're talking about, catching, getting to meet your neighbor and catching the bus with them, all of those sort of opportunities are much more available for people of all ages, whether it's kids, if they can walk to their school, or, people can walk to their job if they're able to live close enough to do that, or to access the things they need. There's real well-being and community benefits to that, and making sure that sort of our walking infrastructure is available, and that our spaces, if we're able to reduce the amount that we're using private vehicles, then that just makes our community environments safer and nicer to be in, so that we can get out and about and meet our neighbors and build those relationships.
Yeah, no, 100%. And I quite like working from home, because I typically try and walk my daughter to school in the morning, so I'll meet some other parents on the way to school, chat to the principal of the school, and then I take the dog for a bit of an extended walk, and I normally meet a couple of other people who've got their dogs, and we have a bit of a chat. And so my morning commute is actually pretty connected. And like yesterday I was walking back, it was really windy, the bins were out, I didn't pull everyone's bins in, but I picked up one bin because the bin man was coming around the corner and the bin was on the floor, and I tried to help him. And then another mate, I thought his bin was about to do the light fandango down the street, so I pulled it in. So you feel like a sense of community and connection just from doing the school commute. Whereas if you're just doing it in the car and you're throwing the kids, which some parents, and because for good reasons, it's like, kids, get out of the car, I'm running late, gotta go. Just that whole different approach to your start of your day. But like you say, it's hard because the world's kind of been built around the motor car, I guess, over the last few years. And I guess it's one of the challenges, when people sort of go, oh, you bloody hippies, you still drive your cars and get on your planes, don't you? And it's like, well, yep, because kind of have to right now. But, and I think that the best phrase I heard, I can't remember who first said it or who it's attributed to or who I heard it from, but the guy who invented the light bulb did it under candlelight. And I think that's the thing I keep saying to people is we haven't got perfection. No, we have not got a fully zero emission, perfectly green, socially and environmentally connected transport system, but to create that, we've got to work with what we got, and it's going to be a transition unless MRCagney comes in with a magic wand overnight, and tomorrow morning everyone's like, whoa, where's the road god? why am I on a bike?
Yeah. And yeah, like there's there's no silver bullet, but I think it's just important to keep trying and working towards it, because the impacts are massive, and everyone wants to live in happy communities or happy places, and the more we can do that, the more we can help make that happen, I think the better everywhere is going to be.
Is there like an exemplar city or area that you kind of go, look, if we could just actually copy and paste that, or is it I mean, it's more nuanced than that, but people typically go, oh, like Amsterdam, Copenhagen, like they've kind of got it nailed. London's pretty good in terms of the tube, and obviously that infrastructure is embedded. It's been there since sort of the Victorian era, so you're kind of lucky that someone had the foresight to get that all go. Imagine London without a tube right now. Like that ain't happening. So yeah, what is there one exemplar city, or is there what if you could like wave a magic wand and say Auckland, right, tomorrow it looks like this, what would you transplant it with?
I don't know if there is. I don't know if there is an example. And like you talk about the Amsterdams and the Copenhagens of the world in terms of like, and they've I think what's really exciting, especially for me around like Amsterdam, is that I think it was in the 70s they were having significant sort of road deaths, right? Kids were being killed, and so the people just stood up and said, no, we want safer streets for our kids. And it was a grassroots sort of people led demanding change, and like at the time this quote says we can't be like increase our cycling mode share, we can't get more people cycling, that's not Amsterdam, that's not us, right?
Wow.
And so like I think it's I don't think there is an exemplar city. And I talked to transport planners in the Netherlands, and they're complaining about how there's too much traffic sort of engineering going on, and how they keep doing road widening, so they complain about the same things that we do. But I think there's learnings from places, and I think the most important thing is it's not the tubes of London that did things 100 years ago. It's like Amsterdam's sort of demanding change 50 years ago. North America is like not exactly the poster child for this, but they've got cities there doing great things and doing small things. And even in Aotearoa, like the national policy statement for urban development, like that's world leading. Like it's the first country to say we're not going to force anyone to provide car parking. And I could go on about for hours about why that's a big deal, but like the stuff that we're doing here, that's world leading. And so I think it's you got to pick and choose, and there's stuff to be inspired about everywhere.
Nice. I've heard the bus network in Washington DC is particularly good as an example.
Oh no, I don't know about that.
Is that why you had to come back to New Zealand?
Absolutely.
Okay, look, it's not quite worked as I thought it would work out, guys. So yeah, I'm going back to New Zealand. Just don't ring me, I'll ring you.
I think another aspect that's important to think like a lot of the work that we do is focused on sort of passenger transport and how people get around. But another aspect that some other cities, sort of talked about London, and there's a lot of other cities that are doing some really interesting work in this space as well, is goods movement and city logistics. And I think, possibly with the audience that we've got, with businesses, that's possibly something that's going to be interesting, as well as thinking about how that can be made more efficient, both in terms of how things, because a lot of businesses face a lot of barriers, right, to getting goods to where they need to go, and don't have curbside access or can't get to where they need to go to drop their goods off, and are just actually paying a lot of money in parking fines or other things just as a cost of doing business, because there's literally no other way to get stuff to where it needs to go. And so there's a lot of good work being done in that space, I think, in terms of the relationship between business and government. There's to get that plan so that everybody wins, right? We can reduce congestion, businesses can get their goods where it needs to go, whether that's retiming deliveries or whether it's working with the way that curbsides are designed so that there's better access. There's a lot of different elements there, and that's a really important part of the sort of sustainability piece as well, because it's a huge part of our economy as goods movement, and it's really critical. And I think increasingly it'll be something that both businesses and city governments, I guess, are focusing on.
There was, I don't know if they're still going, but there was a B Corp based on the west coast of the US that they were all about that final mile delivery. And they had these little electric bikes, or they might have even just been bikes with like a little truck on the back that you could fit a good amount of stuff in. And then there were really smart people. They sold advertising on the side of their little truck. So, yeah, you know, that kind of stuff. And I think, you know, what we're definitely seeing from the B Corp community more broadly, but also our people we're helping, is this desire to try and work out, well, how do we solve a problem collaboratively? And you know, there's going to be people shipping the same product into the same destination. Okay, well, how do we maybe like, how do we consolidate? How do we and I think more and more people are starting to look to that nth degree of you know, we're definitely seeing, you know, people in an overseas market asking the retailer, who's then asking the distributor, who's then asking the product manufacturer, who's then asking the raw ingredient manufacturer, like, hey, what are you doing? And I think we're seeing that across the arc of the value chain, where like you might be shipping your product out of New Zealand or out of the UK or out of the US, but people now want to know, well, actually, how does it get it to my house? And, you know, is it in a gas guzzling diesel truck, or is it a guy on an e-bike or a girl on an e-bike? Yeah, which is, although that's because I think the NZ Post one's interesting, how they got rid of people on bikes and replaced them with people in electric trucks. You kind of go, well, you actually had the most zero emission machine, and now you've made it. Anyway, that's maybe you did you help them on that? I don't know. Have I opened up?
No, you're not stepping on any toes here.
Yeah, I don't know. It just seems like, well, you used to have people just going around on bikes or walking, and now you've put them in a truck with a battery. Seems a step backwards. I mean, I guess maybe you've got that. I don't know. But no, that's, yeah, there's all heaps of interesting yeah, like I said, I think it's like the broader doing good thing. It's messy, it's nuanced, there is no silver bullet. You kind of, we're all just trying to make it a little bit better, and you know, do the best that we can, which is, yeah, all we can ask. So back to MRCagney for a second. So management buyout, that, like, I think people are going to be intrigued. I'm kind of part of it. Whenever I hear the word management buyout, I imagine like this group of managers going to the boss like, look, we've had a chat. We don't really like you. So could you do one? Or else we got some pitchforks and we're just going to start saying fire to stuff. How does a management buyout work? Like, how do you even start the conversation? Like, yeah, how to just, yeah, unpack that for us for a minute.
Yeah, look, I mean, it's
or can you not talk about it? Confidential and yeah.
Yeah, no, look, I think just kind of at its highest level, it's it was a agreement, and like, you know, there was support from our like Australian owners as well around just recognizing that we started to become two different companies, really, like in two different countries and going in slightly different directions. And it's like, actually, rather than kind of spending a lot of time trying to align with this, let's recognize that we're going in different directions, and maybe the best way to do that is to separate. It's kind of in everyone's interest. And so like, not easy, and there's kind of complexities in the kind of conversations, the negotiations, but ultimately it was a mutual agreement that we're heading in two different directions, and it made sense for both parties to figure out a way to do that cleanly. And we're still in touch, and we're still kind of doing promotions between the two firms, and we did a webinar with them a couple of months ago. So yeah, look, it not easy, but we're fortunate that I guess everyone recognized that it was probably the better outcome. Nice.
Yeah, I think people often forget. When I was, well, a guy who I used to work with when I was selling medical stuff, you know, most companies, when you're selling medical devices in New Zealand, you've got your New Zealand company that reports to an Australian or maybe Asia Pacific head office, so either Singapore, Sydney, or Melbourne, what have you, and then they report into a US or European head office. And the European and American head offices wouldn't appreciate the nuance of the difference between Australia and New Zealand. I think they kind of think, well, you all play rugby, you all speak funny, you like drinking beer and having barbecues. Happy days. But as my mate Malcolm used to inform people, he said, no, you've got to remember that Berlin and London are as far away from each other as Sydney and Auckland are, and the cultural differences are just as big. And I think people forget that there is actually a bit. I mean, I lived in Aussie for a year, then went back to the UK, then came here. And to begin with, I was like, well, I'm going to New Zealand. It's basically going to be a mini Australia. It's it's not going to be that different, but actually it's vastly different. And I think, yeah, and I'd see that play out in the business world. So I totally get how that can happen. So getting into B Corp then, obviously, congratulations, round of applause. Fairly recently, newly minted B Corp on the block. Why B Corp? Obviously, you're kind of in the right environment. You're doing good stuff. You're trying to get social. So it wasn't perhaps a massive leap for you to sort of go, maybe we should start looking at, doing good. But yeah, how did B Corp come about on your radar, and why did you choose to do B Corp compared to not doing it or something else?
Yeah, so maybe I'll cover this one. So I guess it actually probably first came on my radar talking to a couple of Australian consultancies, and so my understanding was that it was actually perhaps bigger, or it was a bit more common there than it was in New Zealand. So this was probably first on my radar maybe 3 years ago, and then I met with Sarah Dennis, who's the MD of a company called Just Add Line. That's a consultancy sort of in our industry.
Yep.
In our sector here in Aotearoa. And so she had just gone through the process and she was talking about it. And so, yeah, just talking to a few other companies was really how it got on my radar. Why did we do it? I guess for different reasons. I think for me personally, it was really around, I wanted to make sure that we weren't just, it wasn't just rhetoric. Like us being a values-based company, us existing to do good, that was really important to me. And and I kind of wanted to just have some evidence to prove that, because it's really easy for anyone to just say, yeah, we exist to do good, and there's no way to kind of prove that. And so that's probably the primary reason. I probably need to come up with a commercial one, because that's not probably good enough. But and so I guess the commercial reason is that in our line of work, we contract to to local governments, central government, to our clients. And a lot of them look for evidence around social responsibility, around environmental sort of responsibility or standards. And we kind of struggled in the past because we're like, we exist to do public transport or sustainable transport, which is good for the environment, but we had no real clear way to prove that, or no certification to do that. And my understanding is increasingly in Australia, that's starting to be, like, B Corp is being accepted as a way to demonstrate that. And so we might be a little bit ahead of the curve, but having the certification to now provide evidence that's internationally accepted of our I guess our doing good. We've already had some clients express interest in this, and over time, I'm expecting clients to start requiring evidence of this. And so that's probably my reasons. Amber?
So I mean, I sort of first found out about it through Jenson, sort of coming in and saying, hey, let's do this thing. Like,
he did some work for a day. He's like, I've done some work, Amber, I found this thing. Can you now go and do it?
Yeah. Yes, basically that.
In my defense, this time I did ask you if you wanted to do this.
That was true. Yes.
You were voluntold.
Yes, this was like, I think what I found interesting about it was the sort of all the things that Jenson said, right? Like, to an objective measure of, we think we're cool, we think we're doing good things, but really, are we? And in comparison to our peers, how are we doing? That's that's sort of a nice measure. But the holistic aspect of it, I found really attractive, that it's not just sort of an environmental certification or a diversity and inclusion certification or something like that. It's the whole package, right? It's looking at everything that you do, which I think speaks more to the intent and the values of the company, rather than just, ticking some boxes in a particular area. And that's really appealing to me. It's nice that it kind of proved that the things that we thought we were doing, we are doing, which is good.
Yep.
But the other piece that I like of it is the fact that it's sort of a community from which we can learn from. We got a lot of value out of your help in the process. I think it wouldn't have been anywhere near smooth if we hadn't had your assistance. really just almost even to help us interpret what we were doing. Right? Because I think that that's quite hard for businesses sometimes to take that step back and say, we've got all these pieces, we've got sort of all these ad hoc policies or procedures or processes and things, but how do we tell the story around all of the stuff that we're doing? I think that that's really hard, and B Corp sort of provides a vehicle to do that, to help you organize your thinking, if you will, around all the bits and pieces that you're doing. And then it provides that really nice framework for how you can improve. And that's, you know, that's kind of it. And I really like the fact that it's a 3-year recertification. A lot of the, you know, the certification programs that you go through are an annual thing. And to be honest, with all the other stuff that's happening in businesses, you're really just scrambling to keep up, right? To say, okay, we've certified. Oh, goodness gracious me, it's come around again. What have we done? Right? Like you're really just playing catch up. And it means that you don't have that opportunity to, again, take that step back and make the meaningful change, because you're just playing catch up. And whether or not you have to demonstrate improvement on an annual basis, which means you have to have a very clear plan in place about how you're going to do that. I think that the 3-year recertification provides the opportunity to go and learn from your peers, right? I won't lie, I'm a little bit overwhelmed by the amount of community there is for B Corp. I don't really even know where to start. I'm like getting all these emails and but once I've had some time to think about how to engage with that, there's obviously a wealth of information out there and a wealth of opportunities to learn from peers and stuff. And, you know, we've already had folks reaching out to us to learn about our journey, which is really cool. Nice. And we'll certainly be reaching out to other people to learn a little bit, I guess, in this next step of, you know, what is that pathway to improvement, and how can we all get better? Nice.
Which is why we call this group the Be Better Group. And that's why it's the Be Better podcast, because it's like, this is the whole thing. Community, learn, help each other grow. That's an interesting observation on the 3-year you know, timeline. I think you're right. I hadn't really given it much thought, but I think that the risk is you if it's 1 year, you're just constantly on the hamster wheel and you don't actually have the time to sit back. So no, I think that's good. But no, I think everything that you've said is what we're hearing in the market. It's what we're hearing as to why people want to do B Corp. It's because of all the pressures, the wanting to prove you're doing the good, supply chain, customers, you know, everyone's kind of wanted to prove. But I think really, Jenson, you summed it up. It's like, actually, it's kind of the right thing to do. Like you've created a values-based business. The event I was at this morning with UC, I can't remember the gentleman's name, but he was giving a talk on like values alignment between employees and a company, and how that's generally missing, and it generally is missing. And I get the sense that that's kind of what you're built around, is that no, well, look, like we've got to. And I think it's the other thing we were sort of talking about was the emotional connection. You know, we're asking, or there's an expectation that as an employee you will emotionally connect to the vision, the mission, the goal, the purpose, and what have you, but it's not always reciprocated by the company. It's kind of like we want you to bring your heart and soul and a pound of flesh and maybe your firstborn, and in return, you know, look, we've got a pool table and we'll buy you beers once a week. Kind of be happy with that. And I think there's this depth of emotional connection, almost like vulnerability, shared sense of purpose, clearly, that companies like yours are bringing, which is what people want ultimately. So go you. I think like you say, it's like proving the good that you were clearly already doing. Because when I was just looking at your score, so you got a cheeky 113.9, just so close to 14. It's like, anywho. But you yes, you scored obviously pretty well in general, but you unlocked a couple of impact business models. So for those of you listening in who don't know that much about the impact assessment, there's kind of 2 levels to the assessment. The main assessment is a measure of your operational goodness. So how do we treat our staff? Are we doing some basic, you know, reporting, transparency, accountability, what have you? But the impact business model, and obviously, if you want to learn more, there'll be a link somewhere around here with our ebook, which explains all of this. The impact business model is where you can prove you've gone out of your way to create more positive social or environmental impact than you are legally required to do. And so you unlocked an environmental impact business model under education and information. And then the big one that you unlocked, it's almost like 30 points of impact business model points, was under your customer impact business model, because of the work that you're doing to create and support people in communities to get access to stuff that they need to get access to. So exactly as you were saying, Amber, like this is complete proof and validation of the fact that you were doing the good. Now you've got like a little cherry on top to prove that you're doing it. So in terms of the B Corp journey, what were the surprises? Like, well, we had no idea actually that we were doing that, but now we know that's really cool. Anything that jumps to mind for you on that one?
Not sure that there was anything that we didn't know that we were doing that sort of jumped out. I was possibly surprised, and pleasantly so, by how rigorous the assessment was and the volume of information required. That took me a bit by surprise. But that's really cool, right? Because that does mean it's robust. It means that it's a legitimate thing. It's not just a tick box exercise. Like, you can't just go through and be like, oh yeah, we do that, right? Because you know that you're going to have to provide the evidence to show that you do. And that's really cool. And it's nice. I mean, as I said, I think perhaps I wasn't particularly surprised by any individual thing that we were doing, but I think having that opportunity to kind of put it all in one place and organize our thoughts around the different things that we're doing was really valuable.
Meanwhile, Jensen was like, I had no idea we did this. Who does this?
I mean, again, I can't possibly speak to that.
We employ people. Where are all these people? Where am I? Oh dear.
Thanks, Tim.
Hey, I speak the truth. I'm consider me here the court jester. Just pointing out the real world as I see it.
I'm just wondering if Tim can come to my annual review, Jensen. Tim,
we are available
for
wedding. We are available for wedding, bar mitzvahs, and annual reviews. Oh dear me. But I think most of the companies we've helped over the last few years, you've been doing the work already, and this was just proof. And I think you're the typical company that we work with right now, where you're the fish in water. You don't recognize necessarily the depth of good that you're doing because it has been so normalized, because you've got great leadership. I'll give Jensen some goods now, because you've got really good
true.
You've got visionary leadership who doesn't like to get bogged down in the detail of the doing, but you've got that values-based vision and leadership, which you're very similar to the team at Genora. Like, going through the assessment with them, they were just like, but that's just what we do. Like, how is that special? Why is that worth points? And it's like, because not everyone else does this, which is why we're still at 0.01 or 2% of New Zealand companies are a B Corp. You're not even in the top 1% of businesses in terms of your social and environmental performance. So you are very special. And so I think there's a new phrase I heard the other day from one of our other clients, who I can't name their name yet, but they are calling it green hushing, where people doing good aren't talking about the good that they're doing. So it's this fine line between greenwashing. It's like Goldilocks, isn't it? Greenwashing, green hushing, perfect green storytelling right in the middle. We're really good, and we can prove it. Away we go. Yeah, nice to go, you. So we're at the hour mark. I'm happy to keep going for a little bit more if you are. You and me can keep picking on Jensen if you want, Amber.
That's always a good time.
So what next for the B Corp? So you've rested on your laurels a little bit. You've had some champagne and some cake, and the team are all like, woohoo, we're awesome. So what's next? Was there one particular area on the assessment that you're like, actually, do you know what, we want to get better on that? Is there one particular part of the business that you want to concentrate on right now?
All right.
I'm not sure. To be honest, we really have kind of taken a breath. And I think, to be honest, I think we need to sort of go away and have a think about it and really do that assessment to see, not only, because it's kind of, you can look at the assessment and say, where's our biggest opportunity, right? In terms of points, which is always one thing that people do when they're looking at recertification. Where is the low-hanging fruit? But the lens that I want to bring to this is, sure, we can probably knock some of those things off, but actually I want to look at this and see if we're going to have, because we will have sort of a pathway to improvement over the next 3 years. I want to make sure that the pathways that we're choosing, or the things that we're choosing to work on, are not just the low-hanging fruit to get points. They're actually aligned with our company strategy, and get buy-in from staff to actually say, well, you guys have seen our scores. does this track with what you think? And where would you want to see us put the most improvement? Because as you said, we really are a values-based company, and it does resonate, and we have a very collaborative sort of decision-making process. And so I guess also because I'm much more internally focused, I want to make sure that the next steps that we take are ones that staff buy into, and they can sort of see the improvement that they want to see for us as a company.
Nice. What a crazy idea.
Right?
Getting the whole team and all your stakeholders on the same journey. Wow, it might catch on one day. Who knows? Nice. Oh, very cool. Well, so yeah, any final thoughts before we sort of wrap up? Yeah. Well, anything you want me to ask or you want to mention before we wrap up?
I suppose one other reason maybe that we went on the journey, certainly now that we've gone through it, is to just challenge and hopefully encourage other firms, particularly in our sector, to think about this and really go down the journey, even if it is just the initial assessment, to see how you track, because you get some insights from that about what you're doing well and where you could improve on. And we're an SME, and we're going, I do think we punch above our weight in terms of making a difference, trying to, and actually making a difference. But if our industry starts to go down this path and really reflect on how they can look after their employees better, how they can have better impacts on the environment and the communities, then the world's going to be a better place. And so I guess I see part of our role now being to just kind of challenge and encourage others to go down the journey and the path as well. Nice.
Yeah, we see this happen in sectors when there's one or two or the first few sort of pop up. It's almost a bit like, was it Roger Bannister running the mile for the first time? It's like, oh, okay, so it can be done. So yeah, I mean, again, just kudos to you being an early adopter, in not only in your sector but in New Zealand. We're still, I think we're 87 B Corps as of yesterday when I last checked. So like I say, it's like 0.01 or 2% of the business community in New Zealand. So yeah, thank you for wanting to be a part of this crazy ass movement and try and make a little bit of difference, so that we all, and you do, you're such a cool business because you're doing it on multiple levels. You're clearly making a big difference on your day-to-day. Your day-to-day work is about making big difference, but you're also part of this movement and you want to help create that movement within your sector. So you're like a triple dipping B Corp. You're just being greedy, spread some of this love, people. Like, what's going on? Cool. Well, look, that's it from me. Yeah, thank you so much for agreeing to jump on and have a natter. Yeah, watch this space for MRCagney, not Mr. Cagney. Sorry, feel really bad. But yeah, no, thank you guys. You're genuine legends, legendesses, doing some really, really cool stuff. And yeah, looking forward to seeing your score in 3 years' time.
Thank you, Tim, and thanks for having us, and thanks for all your help. Because yeah, as Amber said, having a guide on the journey made it so much easier, and it was fun.
It's great.
We try and bring some fun, because why not have some fun and save the planet at the same time? I mean,
why not?
It's perfect. It's an exciting journey, and we're pleased to be on it.
Awesome. All right, guys. Well, yeah, thank you so much. Let me try and work out how to stop the live stream. There we go. So yeah, peace out, everyone. We'll catch you later on the podcast.